All right, Sarah, you are not a stranger to me.
No,
Um,
sir.
but today I wanted to bring you on real quick for a special episode, an impromptu, out of order episode that we could pop in there because something suspiciously amazing happened this week. We were doing our normal recording cadence. We're dropping episodes. I don't promote this show at all. I've still been spending the last few months just working out kinks, making sure that it runs right, figuring out my, sort of who I want to talk to and what I want to do. And then we get like 3,000 downloads in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. A huge spike. Like a huge
A
spike.
huge spike. So I wanted to pop in and talk to all of our new listeners and just say, hey, big question. Are you real? Or is this like a bot farm got a hold of my podcast? I'm very suspicious. So I wanted to come in and just like address people and say, hey, like, how'd you find me? Is this real? Also, I really want to get some feedback. That's what I'm actually trying to do. I want to talk to people directly and try to get some feedback. And I don't like doing solo episodes talking to myself, so you're here.
So
Hi.
I'm the scapegoat, obviously. No, it's good. Yeah, it is it was a crazy spike, and I think this is honestly a good way to test it, ask for feedback, see what they want to say, and if it is a bot farm, which I am not familiar with that in the podcast world, but you have to understand my podcast experience is a handful of them. I don't have the background that you do, and it was wild to like see those numbers and whatnot. So if they're real, they'll respond, and if not, we'll see.
Yeah, if you're real, email me at alex@lifeandlens.com. Actually, let's make this easier. If you're real, text me at 910-850-8127 and say, hey, Alex, listen to your show. I'm real. Just want to let you know. Don't text me back. Leave me alone. I just want to let you know. And then that'll be good enough for me.
Just throwing your phone number out on the internet like that, wild, wild.
Yeah. Actually, what's actually a good segue. This show is called Strangers. I have a bad habit of changing the names of things way too often. And, for 6 years, basically I had a link on my website where anybody could log in and just video chat me for an hour mostly about real estate. And so I was like, oh, let's just make this public and we'll call it Strangers. That came with some challenges because people don't want to actually just all do podcasts. They just like, hey, can we just chat?
Yeah.
And then it became like, I don't really want to only talk to strangers. So then recently I've been calling it Alex Talks to Everyone because I genuinely find people fascinating, each and every one of them, even the weird ones, sometimes especially the weird ones. And and I really do have like I'm a hyper extrovert, so there's no amount of people that burn me out or drain me. So putting my phone number on the internet is not scary because I'm like, what are you going to do? You're going to talk to me all day? Great. It's exactly what I want.
Oh my gosh. As an introvert, that's like my worst nightmare. My mom texts me and I'm like, oh, I gotta text mom back. Like, yeah. I mean, different people, I guess, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think
if you're
hyper extrovert is also the proper way to describe yourself because like I know plenty of extroverts that still would not do that. So
910-850-8127. Text me. I don't care. Also, I'm a big boy. Like, oh, you're obnoxious. I'll block you, or I'll just tell you I don't want to be friends. Like, I can set my own boundaries.
fair enough. Fair enough.
And if
Good
you
stuff.
are listening to this and you have an interesting story and you want to come on the show, email me at Alex and Life and Lens, and we'll get you on the show.
Because you talk to everyone
I talk to everyone.
per the
If you're
title.
interesting, I don't want to put out content that's just two people boring talking about nothing. I want to talk about interesting things.
Okay.
That's why weirdos are so cool. I'm like, oh, you're weird. This is weird.
What is a
You're weird.
weirdo to you? Like you kind of are dropping that. Like what is that?
Mm, anybody who lives a life that is like narrow enough that like Miss Kate and I say that being boring is the worst, is an unforgivable sin.
Okay.
So boring is just, no hobbies, no real interests. You just kind of exist. You'd never listen to this show because you probably don't listen to that many podcasts. A weirdo is anybody that does have interests, that does have goals, that does have, a quirk, couple quirks, and doesn't live life or think the same way I do. So to me, they're weird.
Okay. So anyone that's just like different than you, basically.
Sarah's a weirdo. She's
It's
just
true.
writing this fiction novel for the last few months, and I'm like, why, you weirdo?
It's been 12 years, but it's done, and I'm
There
editing
you go.
it.
Isn't that
So
weird?
it is so weird, and I'm so tired of it, and I'm so ready to be done with it. But it's like the art. We were talking like about the artist way, and like how it's so easy to dog on your own creations, and despite the fact that you've got people in your life being like, "Wow, this is like really great," and I can't break that cycle right now. So we're spinning our wheels in the editing process a little bit, but it's getting there slowly, agonizingly, but surely.
Nothing I've ever made is good to me.
According to you, right?
Yeah, everything I've ever made is good to other people, and I'm like, oh, that's how I know everybody else is dumb.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel. They're like, "Wow, this is a really great chapter." I'm like, "Ugh, no, it's actually not."
Ugh,
But
you're an idiot. That's what's going on here. It has nothing to do with me.
doesn't matter if it's a photography or a manuscript. It's the same
Yeah,
curse
any kind of
for
art.
all of us.
Okay, so I brought you on here. I want to say thank you because a little backstory for podcasts. I knew about 6-7 years ago that I would be a good podcaster. I believed it. I'm like, dude, I love talking to people, and I love having interesting conversations. And I have little. You've known me long enough. I have interesting points of view about things, and I know how to articulate and communicate well. And so I was like, dude, I need to do podcasting, but I've never been able to do the production really well. I always just struggle with production, so I've just quit so many times. And this time I did something different where I was like, okay, let's put super low pressure, super low production, and just see if we can get it done. And I think, we did a really interesting format where we just basically really low friction, talk to everybody. We haven't really promoted it. And we're on episode like 85. There's no actual purpose to the show other than just find interesting people and ask them what's going on. I think we're starting to dial that in a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say thanks because it wasn't until I brought you on and your ability to not change your mind every 6 days like I do has allowed me to stay the course a little better, much better than I would have otherwise.
Thanks. I mean, yeah, I've also had a lot of fun with it. I have to be honest. Like, I get to sit and also kind of meet these strangers through the podcast first, so it's been a lot of fun. And obviously, like, consistency matters. If these numbers say anything, and if they're bots, well then, that sucks. But we're not gonna know for a minute. I really think seeing that though is like further proof that if you can be consistent, and it is such. I totally get it. Like the menial tasks can pile up, and for something like this, there's a lot of those. Once you've done your piece and you've recorded it and you've uploaded it, it doesn't end there. You've got another, 9 things you have to do to get it out there. And I totally get those things piling up, like becoming a little overwhelming in a life that's already really busy, and it just kind of falling to the wayside. So it's been fun for me, and I'm glad it's helping you also. It's kind of it really is a win-win.
It's such a good metaphor for so many things that we do in life. You go to the gym and you go once and you leave and you're like, well, I don't look any different. I don't feel any different. It was fun, although it was a bit of a chore. And so you're like, okay, maybe I'll do that again. But then by month 3, by month 6, you're like, wow, I really still don't look any different. This is hard to do now, right? The new allure of the fun of it is over. Nobody cares that you go to the gym or not. They don't care if you skip. They don't care if you go. You basically just do this thing, podcasting, I call it talking into the abyss. I'm like, you're just putting it out there. Nobody cares.
I mean, yeah.
And so with no feedback mechanism, it's very, very, very hard. It's very easy to quit. Sorry, anything. It's easy to quit anything when there's no feedback mechanism. You start a business and you're like, I got this widget to sell and nobody bought it. And so tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm just going to spend my whole day trying to sell this widget, and then nobody bought it. And it's like, dude, how long before you quit?
Right.
And so I think having the feedback mechanism, even a little bit, is so good. It's so important. That's why, two things on that. Um, this is why I want, if you are a real listener, I really want you to say something to me to make sure that you are not a bot. I currently think that you are a robot. And so if you want to prove that you are not a robot, you have to message me. Second, the newsletter. The newsletter was another one. You know, I've been doing newsletters on and off for years. And I finally, when I met you, I was like, hey, I have to put out a newsletter every week. And I'll write it, but I need help with infrastructure. I need help with accountability. I need help making sure that, you know, sometimes you do a lot, sometimes you do less, but just making sure week to week you keep a little bit more stability than I do. And sure enough, all the people, you know, every week now I get feedback and it's very encouraging. I'm like, dude, I will invest because I love people so much. I will invest in people one by one. You've been around me long enough to know now. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I'll give individuals my time, but I can't give nobody my time. I have to have at least a few to invest in. So, yeah, feedback mechanisms, really important.
It's just like, and it's any industry. It doesn't have to just be podcasting, but any industry. If you're screaming into the void without any sense, like at first it's going to feel that way, sure, but then you have no sense, you know, later if it's working or not, you're going to flounder. It doesn't matter if it's podcasting or marketing or writing a book or, you know, whatever it might be. You need something, some semblance of a response to know if you're doing the right thing or not. And that's just true for kind of everything, at least in life.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go to the gym for 6 months and you see no results, it's like, dude, the likelihood you're going to quit is high.
Yep.
You know, I did
But,
this
like,
one in 20.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, but there's also other things that like contribute to success in that case. Just like there's other things that contribute to the success of a podcast like this. Like, how's your diet? How's your sleep? How's your, you know, mental health? Like all that stuff with the gym, I think matters in my opinion. And a podcast is the same thing. Like, how's your structure? How's your business doing on top of the podcast? Who are you bringing in? Like, all of this is going to contribute to the success of something like that. But again, if you don't have a feedback loop, it kind of falls on this cycle of I call it like the despair cycle. That's a little bit of a dramatic word, but you don't see
No,
the
I love
results.
drama.
And you love drama. Okay. But you don't see the results and you just kind of like throw it up in the air and you're like, ah, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is even harder because you're like, not only do you have to do the podcast, you're like, hey, it's not working. Oh, okay. Let's promote it more. Let's get better thumbnails. Let's get better titles. Let's share it more. Let's ask people for reviews. Let's interact with our customers. Let's get better guests. Let's get a better structure. Let's provide more value. So when you say like, hey, when you're not getting that feedback loop, it's like, yeah, it might be you because you're just doing the bare minimum. So then it's even harder to be like, not only are you not going to get feedback, you got to work even harder and do more and put more resources into it and then still hope. So it's so interesting. So many of these things are like faith-based in a lot of ways. I have to have faith that I know if I go to the gym, it'll work. If I put out this podcast and put out this newsletter, I'll be able to talk to people. I have nothing to sell.
Yeah.
So I literally am just clamoring to reach people and have a dialogue with people. But you have to do it on business is the same way. You're like, hey, I think this business will work. I kind of gave up on real estate in 2021 because I was underwriting deals, looking at deals, putting in offers, underwriting. And I was like, none of this makes money. And it's like pulling teeth to get a deal. I'm like, how hard and how much money do I want to raise? How hard do I want to work? And how much money do I want to raise to buy a $5 million deal that doesn't make money? That's a lot of work, a lot of stress, a lot of resources, a lot of trust from my investors to then maybe make 5%.
Yeah. Yeah.
At some point, you know, you're like, well, thankfully with business, the market does give you a pretty immediate feedback loop. It's like, hey, this is going to make 3%. You're like, no, thanks.
Pass. Yeah.
Yeah, pass. With content, it's harder. The gym even, you know, you go to the gym for 6 months, it's like, you're going to start to notice results. But with content, it's probably the hardest thing I've done in terms of lack of feedback loop.
Well, it's so oversaturated too. I mean, you're fighting up against every other single person, business, entity in the world on these platforms. So that's like a daunting task. It's not, and that's why I started my business. Is I think I kept seeing these small businesses get frustrated with their marketing, but it was like it was a lot of this. Like they would make a post once a month, and it was like office is closed today. Because it's so overwhelming when you look at it from the outside, especially when they're there to be like a chiropractor or baker or they're the expert in their field. And then in the last, 15, 20, 10 years, this whole landscape, the digital landscape, has kind of become the way that you get out there. Like they're overwhelmed. You know what I mean? So that was the whole genesis behind what I do. And I find that like getting out there is enough for them to get that feedback they've been looking for, even if it's a little bit, and feel better about, what they're putting out into the community and the world, digitally at least.
Yeah. It's a stressful skill set. It's a
Yeah.
stressful endeavor to just be like, oh, I'm going to go talk into the void.
Do you get stressed actually?
Me, yeah, I'm a very stressed out type
Are
of
you
person.
really?
Yeah, in a weird way, I have like a pretty high level of neuroticism. Um, yeah, I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole. There's stress. Stress comes in different ways, in different forms, about different things. But yeah, yeah,
You
I
do?
stress.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. I could have seen it going either way. Like now, my days are never really that stressful. Or I think it's healthy and reasonable to feel stressed, especially if you're spearheading something that no one else has done before. But people think and handle about like my husband's never stressed, ever stressed,
Some
and
people are very low neurotic.
I
You
just
can,
don't get it.
if you go to Google and look up Big Five personality test, and then take that test. And one of the metrics, I would love everybody to do this. One of the metrics is neuroticism, and neuroticism is like your propensity to feel negative emotions, stress,
Huh.
anxiety, sadness. And if you have a high number, you're gonna have those feelings. And if you have a low number, you're not gonna have those feelings as much. And that's just that.
Interesting.
And actually, this is what I learned about money because I realized when I over the last 10 years in real estate, I made a good chunk of money, and I learned a lot about money. And so now, not only do I have, I don't want to say I have an abundance, but like I have enough. I don't have any real. I'm not gonna make rent stress, and I understand money, so I always know. I'm like, well, here's our risk. This is. I could go make this. I could go make more money if I wanted to in this way, and yet I still stress the same amount about money, just in a different way.
Interesting.
So what I realized was my stress level is based on my stress level, not about my circumstances. People that think, it's the old saying. People think like, "Oh, money buys happiness," and I'm like, well, if you're kind of the person who's happy, you're going to be happy, and if you're kind of a person who's miserable, you're going to be miserable. It really doesn't have that much to do with the money. Not to say that money doesn't change people's circumstances. It doesn't. It does solve problems, but I stress the same about money when I had a negative net worth as I do now when I have,
A
pretty
positive
well
one.
into pretty well into seven figures now, but I stress the same amount, even though it's not the same type. I'm not like, shit, I'm not going to make rent. It's like, what if the stock market crashes? What if the real estate does this? What if rent control? Actually, the big stress that I have most days is, am I fulfilling my potential? And the answer is almost overwhelmingly, absolutely not.
That's a real, casual, low stakes thing to stress about day to day.
That's my point.
I'm
That's my
kidding.
point. Like
That whatever.
people think like you're like, oh, well, money will cure all your problems. I'm like, money will fix your money problems, and then you start to get these uncurable problems.
Yeah, nothing like existential questions at 8 a.m.
Yeah, I suffer from I stress about existential dread. I don't stress about making rent.
I think rent stress might be easier to answer than that too.
That's the thing when people say like, yes, it's simpler. It's got a solution. I know. I say all the time, money solves money problems. When you have a money problem, the solution is extremely simple. You just need more money. Now, that's not always super easy to just go get more money, but it is simple. But when you have money, you're like, well, your health is failing. How do you solve that? Oh, well,
Oh,
my relationship with my parents is, let's say, irreconcilable. money's
We
not
could
going to
do a
solve that. There
whole
is no fix.
podcast on the concept of wealth and what I think wealth is. I'm so serious. Like you're hitting on it already, but like there's such a concept of money as wealth. And I just went through a year program. I've talked to you about it a little bit where I basically did CrossFit and I worked with a holistic health center here in collaboration to see after a year of committing to, nutrition, working out, and healthcare, what changes. And my definition of wealth changed is in that year. Like that to me, it wasn't always about money. It became about how I felt, how am I sleeping, how's my relationship with my husband, how's my relationship with my parents, how's the gym going, what am I eating, how am I feeling my body. Like I think wealth is such a deeper concept than we give it credit for, especially in America. And I don't know why we're so adverse to talking about it beyond dollar signs. Because after this year, I told my husband, like, if we rent for the rest of our lives and we're, able to take a vacation once a year and go see our families when we need to, but our health is this and our, mental health is here, I'd be happy. Like, I'm okay with that because I think all that stuff matters just as much. This is totally not, I know what you want to talk about on this podcast, but I'm super passionate about this just because I just wrapped up my year with them. So.
Yeah. No, this is what I think about most days. So, yeah, we can do it. We can do another
do another episode. Throwaway.
Do another episode about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like talking to most people about this. This is the most fascinating topic, especially because I came from this FIRE community, financial independence, retire early, and so it's all these people that are like trying to make money and trying to save and making sacrifice, and then you make money, you get a big balance sheet, and then you're like, well, now what do I do with my time? Much harder problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back on track.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we need our meeting leader.
How do we get here? Yeah, Becca keeps us on track.
Yeah,
you and I are
Becca?
both bananas. That's a life pro tip. If you are prone to distraction, get you a structured integrator in your life just to help you out.
Ours is called
okay. 2 more things I want to chat about, and then we'll go. How do people hire you? If they're sitting there and you're listening, you're like, dude, I want to do a podcast or I want to do a newsletter, of which I recommend people do both immediately and just get it going. How do people hire you?
Yeah, I mean, so you can email me. A lot of this is conversation based. We don't just blindly take clients just because a lot of times they're not even sure what they need, and sometimes we're not 100% the right fit. Like they might be in a paid ad situation, and we do that a little bit, but not to the extent that some of these people need. So I always recommend, let's have a conversation. Email me, sarah@yourgreenhorizon.com, and we can schedule actual meetings to talk about it. But I really like to take in account of like where people are as a business and as a brand before we are signing on dotted lines. Because at the end of the day, like I want them to be successful. And if they need a whole website built out, like we're not the people for that. I'll get you to the right people, but like I'm not gonna just blindly.
Stop telling people what you're not good at out of the gate.
I'm just saying, like I'm gonna be honest with people from the beginning. If you want a newsletter, if you want your podcast out there, if you need structures and like integration between your systems, we're your people. Social media management, we got you. But like conversations have to happen to figure out what they need. So
sure,
email me.
If you need somebody to keep you from quitting in 90 days.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah's good.
Basically, to bully you and to stop changing your mind every 6 days. That would be me.
That's great.
That's part of my role.
Okay. Last thing I want to talk about is these 2 lead magnets that we talked about. I should have done this probably 6 years ago. Just like, hey, here's something that I think is valuable. I'll give it away for free in exchange for an email newsletter. And I wrote one recently called How to Make Friends as an Adult, which I know got you kind of excited.
Yeah.
And then we decided today we're gonna write, or I'm gonna write 40 books to read before you're 40. I love books.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's clear.
No, I didn't understand. No, I'm surprised. Do you read?
I'm an avid reader.
I know, Alex. Yeah, I mean, like, what about them? I think they're 2 great lead magnets. We're working on the extrovert one first, how to make friends, and we've talked about it a little bit, how there's like this idea and this notion that, especially after you leave school, college, or whatever in this country, how hard it is and how hard it can be to make friends. And you and I started talking about that, and I said that, and you were like, that's bullshit. And thus this
It's
lead
not hard to
magnet
make
was
friends.
this born. Yeah, it was born
Yeah.
out of that conversation.
Yeah. It's not hard. It's just people don't try at all,
Yeah.
you know? Or
You
they
know,
think they're
I
going to make
read
friends
through
by
it.
proximity. I think proximity is how most people make friends. They're like, well, I ran into this person at the thing that I do. And I think that's actually a pretty lousy way to make friends. Like, oh, well, they work at the same place as me. And I'm like, you hate your job. Why are you connecting with somebody over this random thing that you happen to do? Maybe the gym is a good one, but like hobbies. Like, hey, I met this person at like Miss Kate meets people at the Quilt Guild. That's a good way to make friends.
That's awesome.
But like
Because you know you've
in
got
Austin,
something in common. Yeah.
yep, yep. But like I go to this like this morning, I'm gonna go after I get off here. I'm gonna go down the street and I go. There's this group that just meets up at this coffee shop local to me, and I'm like, oh, I'll go meet these people, but they're just people that live in the same side of town as me and go to a coffee shop. There's no overlap in purpose.
But you might find it. I mean, that's the reality. Like, when you're talking with strangers, right, you might find people who are aligned a little bit with your
You might, sure, sure, you
something.
might,
Yeah.
but I think what happens is people just they settle. They're like, oh, I got along with this person, and they were at the coffee shop, so like I guess we'll be best friends.
Yeah.
Or like people with kids, it's like, well, our kids go to the same daycare, so I guess we'll be friends. How do you, I guess the better question, the better article should have been like, what do you do with friends as an adult? You know?
I think that could be another one.
Yeah.
Because
What do you do with
there's very, very almost rigid categories I see people fall into, especially now as like a lot of my friends are having children or like they're pregnant and they're going to have children. Like that worldview kind of falls into the fellow like parents and things like that. And then you've got those who are like, mid-20s without children kind of fall into like a group together. It's kind of crazy to see. And it's no one's actively thinking about that. Like, oh, this is my second kid. I can't have friends who are single or like no children now. But it just kind of naturally happens. Like there's this gravitation that happens. I don't necessarily know why, but I see that in my own life.
My buddy Jeremy has 4 kids under, what, 8? Something?
Whoa.
And we just went to the air show together, Oshkosh. He flew us from Dallas to Wisconsin and went to the air show together. So, and we met in a private paid real estate for veterans mastermind group. Hyper niche.
Yeah. Wow.
And we're business partners now.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess if you make the time.
Okay. That's all I got. Do you got anything else?
No, I'm here to just be a part of the everyone, and Alex talks to everyone.
Yeah. I wonder how long this name of the podcast will last before I change it again.
I'm gonna force this one to stay.
You like this one?
It's better than Strangers for sure because like half the guests on there you knew a little bit anyway. So, and it's way more accurate to your life because you just talk to everyone. So, and I will bully you into keeping this one because I'm not
Maybe.
rebranding a podcast thumbnail for the umpteenth time.
Maybe. Okay. Hey, thank you so much. This is great. Also, if you are real, if you're a real listener, if you're a human being, fucking prove it. Email me, text me,
What's that number again?
910-850-8127.
There it is.
You can put it in the show notes, actually. I don't care. And
I will.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, we have no reviews on Spotify. A Spotify review would be good. Or Amazon. I think all of our listeners are on Amazon, which is why I'm super suspicious.
We'll find out. I mean, your phone might be
We'll
blowing
find out.
up.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna regret this. I'm like, oh, I got 600 text
100%.
messages.
I'm gonna love it on the sidelines.
No, I'll be so happy.
Right.
I'll be so happy. All right, this is good. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. Thank you.